Our first documentary, Raw Deal: A Question of Consent, premiered at Sundance in 2001. That was an incredibly fast turnaround. We decided to make it in January of 2000, and then 1 year later we were at Sundance premiering it. It was a little too quick too, because I wasn't even done editing it yet. But then my producing partner Alfred said one of the all-time great things. We were working on like version 1.2 of Final Cut or something at that point. It was horrible and really glitchy. Really, the technology was just really rough, especially to daisy chain all these hard drives together, because they were so expensive and didn't really store enough. And SCSI was the name of that technology. It was terrible and glitchy. And so I was still editing the movie. We were 5 days away from our premiere. We hadn't sent the master yet to Park City, and they were panicking because we had gotten in to the festival on a rough cut. So they knew it wasn't done yet. They're like, where the hell's the movie? And so Alfred came in, and this is, I say it to this day, he said, you don't have to finish, but you have to stop. And I was like, okay, all right, I got it. So which wherever I was that I could live with sort of premiering it. But then it blew up at the festival. It was on the front because I thought, only a few hundred people are going to see it, which is true. But we're the first film to sell out all of our screenings. They were talking about adding an additional screening. And the movie winds up on the front page of the New York Post. And it just sort of blows up. And we did 60 interviews in like 5 or 6 days. And the last question of every interview was always the same. And it was like, well, now that you've been like anointed the bells of the Sundance Ball by the New York press, like, are you going to move to LA or New York? Like, what's your next move? And as obvious it was to them that we were going to move to Los Angeles or New York, it was just as obvious to us that we were going to come home to Miami. First of all, home is where you go when you're done with other shit. That's why they call it home. But also, we had just spent a year, kind of a whirlwind year, working on this project. I still wanted to finish it. And we kind of thought that we would build a brand on Miami, that the geography would play, that we weren't going to put Miami on the map. Miami was going to help put us on the map. And in the same way you think of a Kevin Smith in New Jersey, or Rick Linklater and Robert Rodriguez in Austin, or Baltimore with Barry Levinson and John Waters, or New York with Spike Lee or Woody Allen and Martin Scorsese. It's like we wanted to be the Miami guys, because you'd be two more schmucks peddling your wares in New York or LA, but like the Miami guys, those guys. And to that end, we needed a calling card piece. Raw Deal, which was about the alleged rape of a stripper at the Delta Chi fraternity house at the University of Florida. It was a true crime piece. It was very, very much in what we wanted to be our wheelhouse. But it wasn't a Miami calling card piece. That's why, we had wanted to do what was sort of the first, what would be the best pilot project for us and Raconteur, which we had just branded at the time, to say, this is who we are and this is what we want to do. And one of the stories from our childhood that we'd always wanted to tell was kind of we had this thesis statement. We didn't think it was that provocative, and we didn't think that it was particularly controversial or shocking that narco dollars generated during that era had found their way into infrastructure and helped really build the modern city of Miami, both literally in terms of investment in infrastructure and construction and development, but also in terms of reputation and how the dangerous, sexy, cool kind of press about Miami in the era helped drive Scarface, Miami Vice, and people who wanted to be at America's Riviera, America's Casablanca, and so we started there, and that's how it began, and we started really with the Florida Moving Image Archive and gathering the local media, TV news archive footage that we remember growing up with, sitting at the kitchen table at 5 o'clock with the local news while mom was, you're doing your homework and mom's making dinner, and like this was sort of every night on TV. Watching it all together at the same time is quite a petrifying experience. I called my mom up after we sat through, I can't even tell you how many hours and hours of just murder and mayhem and drugs and crime and cash. And I called my mom and I said, what the fuck were you thinking bringing up children, raising children in Miami in that era? And we had a really interesting conversation about that. And my grandfather, who's been in the real estate business in South Florida for 70 years nearly, since he graduated University of Miami Law School, he challenged me on our thesis early on, and now nobody does. Like now it's just sort of assumed that's right, that just like drug money built the city of Miami. I think there's a lot of truth to that. The debate comes in, what investment, what sort of South American investment or Miami being the hub to the Latin Americas would have accomplished without the drug trade. That I think is the crux of the debate. But I think there's no doubt that when you're talking about, the number one industry in the early 1980s was real estate at $12 billion. Number two was tourism, I think around $8 or $9 billion a year, and drugs were at 12 billion. So it tied for our top industry in terms of revenue generation at the time. And then the question becomes how much of that found its way into real estate, which was the top, the top revenue generator, or the top industry in South Florida at the time, and obviously quite a bit, and still does.